You know that feeling when you want to learn all the languages at once? Everything just seems so exciting and you want to jump into all of them. Well, I get it. I've been there so many times. So today I thought I'd share some of my personal do's and don'ts of learning multiple languages at the same time. Hopefully this video will help you stay consistent, avoid some frustration, and just enjoy the process a lot more. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe, and now let's get started. The first thing that you should never do is start multiple languages at the same time. So basically be a beginner in more than one language at a time. Being a beginner is very time consuming. You have to learn so many new words, new grammar structures. You have to get used to a whole new language, and it's impossible to keep up with that times 3 or times 2 times 4, whatever. What I would do instead is I would wait till you reach the intermediate level and then add a new language. Or if you are already at the intermediate level in your other languages, feel free to add a new one if you have the time and you want to. But starting 2 languages at the same time, at least in my opinion and from my experience, is very time consuming. You probably will end up neglecting one. I remember one year at uni, I decided to start Arabic and Danish at the same time. And don't get me wrong, I was really motivated, and Arabic is one of my dream languages that I would love to learn. But it was just too much to keep up with on top of my other classes that I had to take and work on. So that's like a very normal circumstance. I think everyone has work or school, whatever. Life just got too busy and I ended up neglecting Arabic and focusing more on Danish instead, which is a shame because I really like Arabic. Nothing against that language. As I said, it's one of my dream languages, but it was just impossible to keep up with 2 new languages. So I think it's actually more time efficient if you start one language, get to intermediate, and then start another language then, because you will actually see progress way faster than if you were to start 2 new languages at the same time. Another thing that you shouldn't do is you shouldn't learn languages that are very similar to each other at the same time, especially again, if you really want to start 2 new languages at the same time, that's fine, but don't start 2 languages that are very, very similar, like Spanish and Italian or Spanish and French, Danish and Norwegian. They share the same vocab, grammar patterns, and they sound very similar. So it's almost impossible not to confuse them. I remember when I had just moved to France and I was still very new to speaking French because I learned French kind of fast, right? So it was still a new language for me, and I decided to take a Spanish class at uni. And I remember that every time I left that class, because that class was Spanish taught in French, right? And French is not my native language. I remember every time I left that class, I was just so confused and I didn't know which language was which. What I recommend instead is choosing languages from different families. So, for example, Spanish and Norwegian, or German and Portuguese, or Chinese and, I don't know, Polish, right? Languages that have nothing to do with each other, or at least very little to do with each other. But that's not to say that you shouldn't learn languages that are similar to each other. It's totally fine to do that, but what I would recommend is wait until you feel very comfortable in one of them. So, for example, now that I've been fluent in French for many years, I went back to learning Spanish and it's fine. I don't confuse them anymore. But a few years ago, it was a completely different story. Another thing to remember, and this one's very important, is that if you are learning multiple languages at the same time, don't expect super fast progress. And that's not to say that you won't make progress, because you will, but it won't be as fast as if you were to focus on just one language and really give it your full attention. I think it's wise to manage your expectations, because if you do, then you will avoid burnout and you will avoid some frustration. So what I recommend is assigning each language a role. I choose one language that is my main focus, the language that is my top priority. Then let's say that I'm learning 3 languages at the same time, right? So one is going to be my main priority. The second one might be a language that I'm just trying to maintain, or a language that I'm just learning through immersion. And then the third language can be just for fun. And roles can shift over time. The key is staying flexible. So a language that was your main priority 2 months ago might now become a language that you're just trying to maintain, right? For example, my main priority over the last few months was Spanish, but now I decided to hit pause on Spanish, just the language that I'm trying to learn through immersion, and I'm focusing on other languages at the moment. It might change in a few weeks, I don't know, because life is unpredictable, but you know, the key is staying flexible. The more languages you're trying to learn at the same time, the more flexible you need to become. I love this method because it helps me to know what language I need to prioritize, and it also helps me manage my expectations. So, of course, I won't expect progress to be really, really fast in a language that I'm just learning through immersion, because that's the plan, that's the role that I assigned to that specific language, right? Learning multiple languages at the same time means different tasks, different methods, different study plans, and a little structure helps keep you consistent. What I usually do is I sit down once a week and I look at my schedule for the next week, and I try to identify gaps basically where I can squeeze in a study session. So I basically just write down, let's say, Danish, and then what I also like to plan in advance is what I'm gonna do for each language, because then when I sit down to study, I don't have to think about what I want to do, which resource I want to use. I just sit down and I know exactly what I'm gonna do, what the plan is, and it helps me save a ton of time. Personally, I'm a morning person and I feel the most energized right after I wake up. So I plan my study sessions in the morning, especially for the language that is my main priority at a specific moment. Because that language is my main priority, I learn it first thing in the morning to make sure that even if I don't have time later in the day, at least I did something, because doing something even 15 minutes is better than nothing. And then if I have time throughout the day, I might listen to something or just immerse myself in the language that I'm learning through immersion. And then maybe in the evening, when I still have the time and energy, I will study my fun language for like 15 to 20 minutes. Of course, again, being flexible is key. So if I have more time, then I might study my main priority language some more, or I might listen to something else in the language that I'm trying to learn through immersion. But the most important thing I do is I make sure I find the time to study my main priority language. If you're a night owl, you can reverse this and you can study in the evening, whatever works for you. But especially if you struggle with staying consistent, try planning your study sessions. I promise you it works, and that way you can make sure that you are not neglecting any of your languages. Okay, my final tip for you is to mix up your study methods, your resources, to keep things fun. Because if you're learning, let's say 2 or 3 or even 4 languages at the same time, and for each one you use a textbook, then it can get really boring over time, and we want to avoid that, right? If you're a beginner in one of the languages that you're learning, you can use a textbook or a structured course. Those are great for beginners. Then for a language that you are learning through immersion, of course, you're gonna use podcasts and YouTube videos, movies, TV shows, books, articles, short stories. Then for your most advanced language, you can use speaking exercises, writing exercises, or you can book a speaking class with a native speaker. Basically, you just want to keep things fun. All right, that's it for today's video. I really hope you found it helpful. Let me know in the comments what languages you are learning right now. I'm currently learning Spanish, Russian, and Danish, and I'd love to know what languages you guys are learning. So let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.